Hello, and welcome to English Digest. I'm Seb.
And I'm Elsie.
So how are you doing today, Elsie?
Pretty good. What about you?
I'm good. I'm a little bit stressed. I'm finishing up some things with school, getting, ready for final exams.
So you've been quite busy, huh?
Yes. I think it's the busiest I've been since I was in high school, actually.
Okay, so speaking of high school, when you were in high school, did you have a part-time job?
That's a good question. I actually didn't have a part-time job in high school. I was not the best student, and so I needed to spend a lot of time kind of catching up or pretending to study, I guess. So yeah, I never got round to having one. I did have one in university, though.
Okay,
I had a part-time job throughout university. I was a English teacher.
English teacher already?
Yes. I mean, I lived in Europe, and so the place where I lived was Spain. Not many people spoke English, and so I taught English in a primary school. And I think you did something similar, right? You were in a bushiban?
Right. I worked as a teaching assistant.
Okay. A teaching assistant. So you were helping the main teacher, kind of plan the lessons and give the lessons and make sure all the kids understood.
Right, I was helping the foreign teachers in that bushiban.
That must have been very good for your English as well.
Right, and I could learn a lot of skills from them, the teaching skills.
That's a very good point. I think one really good thing about doing part-time jobs is you learn a lot of transferable skills. So a transferable skill is basically any kind of skill that you can use in different kinds of jobs. So one that I always think of when I think of transferable skills is time management, the ability to plan your time well and organize your day well. That's a very useful skill, especially for jobs where there's a lot of pressure. You have to work for deadlines. And that could be any kind of work. You could be a journalist, you could be a teacher, you could be working in the government. There's lots of times you might have to work for tight deadlines. So were there any transferable skills that you developed while you were an English teacher?
So I observed their classes. At that time, I learned how to do classroom management.
Classroom management. Okay, yeah, that's a very good transferable skill between different teaching jobs.
Yes.
Okay, so there's lots of reasons why we might want to get a part-time job, and getting transferable skills is not the only one, and nor is earning money. So in today's assignment, we're actually going to be looking at part-time work and the things that we can get out of part-time work, the things that we can achieve through part-time work. So, shall we take a look at today's topic and instructions?
Yes, 那今天的提示呢是下方圆饼图呈现的是台湾高中生是否有打工及打工目的的调查结果。请依据图表的内容撰写一篇英文作文，文分两段，文长至少是120个单词。第一段注意哦，我们要描述图表的内容。第二段则是描述你读书的时候是否有打工的经验，并且说明理由。
Right. So the pie chart represents how many students in a Taiwanese high school have a part-time job and what those of them who have the jobs earn their money for. Please describe the chart in detail in the first paragraph. In the second paragraph, write whether you have a part-time job and why or why not. Now, part-time jobs are different from full-time jobs. If you do a full-time job, you work 9 to 5 your whole day. You go to work in the morning, you come home in the evening, and that's all of your responsibilities. A part-time job is a shorter job that you do for less money. So you could do it as a student, or maybe if you're a parent and you have lots of responsibilities looking after your kids, you might have a part-time job as well. Lots of different people have part-time jobs.
是的，所以呢，我们有全职的工作跟兼职的工作。那我们今天要探讨的是兼职工作的部分哦。So Seb, what reasons do people do part-time work?
That's a good question. So we talked about transferable skills and we talked about earning money. But why would we want to earn money? Well, we could be saving money, or you could be perhaps helping your parents, especially in countries or in places where people have less money. They might do part-time jobs to help support their family. And when you support your family, you help provide money or help do work to make things easier for everybody in your family. So that's another reason. You also might want to earn money so you can buy supplies, buy school supplies, stationery or books and things that you need for your class.
Or buy cool stuff to show off.
Basically, cool stuff to show off, exactly. So what did you earn your money for? What do you normally spend your money on when you were a assistant teacher?
Okay, so I chose that job because first, I wanted to buy cool stuff to show off. And second, I wanted to gain some work experience.
That's a very good point. It's very important when you're in university to try and get some work experience because that really helps you after graduation. So very good reasons. All right, shall we take a look at how we're going to develop an approach for today's assignment?
好，我们今天要注意到的呢，第一个就是本篇它是图表写作，所以图表写作呢，呈现的是统计数字 statistics， 还有事实 facts， 数据分布的情形 distributions， 和调查或报告的说明 explanations。 那常见的步骤是第一个我们先分析图表，确实描述图表所传递的主旨，再来就是呢解读图表的内容，描述图表中具有意义而且值得描述的数值或是比较其相对的关系。第三个我们在描述自身的相关经验，适时的加入自己的看法或推论以呼应主题。
So some advice, some things that we might want to think about when we're writing about graphs or writing about tables is about the structure, how we're going to be structuring our essay. So the first thing you're going to want to remember, especially when you're doing this for an exam, is to read the instructions carefully, okay? So you'll find that there are a lot of graph writing and table writing and chart writing exercises in your exams, your English exams here in Taiwan, but they don't always ask for the same thing. So be careful when you're going to answer these questions. Are they asking you to explain the data? Are they asking you to talk about how the data reflects or differs from your own life? Are they asking you to compare it with something else? These are all things that you should be aware of. You don't want to write the wrong answer to the question. Now, on top of that, you're also going to want to paraphrase the question when you start your essay. Now, paraphrasing just basically means saying the same thing but in different words. So the reason we do this is so it's very clear that we've understood the question and that we're developing on the question as well. So that will make it very clear to the examiner that you know what you're talking about and you're responding to the prompt.
OK, SEP 的这个提醒是非常重要的哈。第一个，我们必须要仔细读题。第二个呢，我们在开头的地方可以换句话说 paraphrase the question， 然后带出主题。好，再来呢，如同一般文章的起承转合，图表写作的内容必须完全符合图表中的资讯。首先呢，要清楚理解本图表的主题是什么，图表中的统计数字或符号分别代表什么，好，也是要理解清楚的。再来其中有没有哪一项最突出等等的，我们都可以提出来。那再来是依提示说明，第一段需要指出各个项目分别为何，需要客观的分析图表显示的资讯哦。避免增加过多的个人观点，好，这是要特别小心的地方。再来第二段呢，就是要将个人经验融入你的写作，描述自己是否有打工及打工目的。好，这个地方就要你个人的经验跟意见了。
We're also going to want to think about using specific language to make our explanation clearer. So you're going to want to think about using signposting language. Now, signposting language is words and phrases that make it very clear about what you're talking about in the graph. So, for example, if we're talking about a pie chart, we might use words like wedge, for example. So a wedge is a triangular shape in a pie chart which represents part of the pie. If you look over at your magazines, and we've got this pie that we're going to be talking about later, which has two parts, we can say that there's two wedges. We could say the larger wedge is the number of students who've never had a part-time job, and the smaller wedge is how many students have or have had a part-time job. So language like that makes it very clear for you to talk, for the reader what you're talking about. Now, you're going to want to learn different words and phrases for different kinds of graphs. If you're talking about a bar chart or a line graph, for example, then it's important that you know words like x-axis and y-axis, because these are words that describe the two lines, the vertical line and the horizontal line in the chart. So do some revision before you take your exam and make sure you know these basic table and graph words and vocabulary.
好的，那再来呢，除了内容要流畅完整之外啊，文法的结构、组织，还有字词的搭配、修辞等等的技巧，自然运用也是很重要的。那我们要先求能够正确使用字句来描述数值的变化，再尝试运用不同的单字，表达增加文章的深度哦。然而呢，与其挑战艰深晦涩而且难易不协调的字词，或是复杂易错的句子，不如用简单易懂的字词和清楚有把握的句子。好，我们先求有，再求好。
All right, so let's move on now to brainstorming for today's assignment. So let's take a look at the pie chart itself. So you'll remember I just mentioned there is one in your magazines, which is the one that we're going to be writing about in our assignment. And what can we see here, Elsie? What does this pie chart represent?
Okay, so we can see two parts in this pie chart, right? So one of them is 74.3% of, I believe, high school students never had a part-time job. What about the other part?
The other part is represents 25.7% of students, and that represents the people who had a part-time job or had one in the past. So based on this pie chart, we can say that a majority of students have never had a part-time job, and a minority of students have a part-time job or had one in the past. So majority and minority are good words to know for today's assignment. The majority is the largest group of people in a group, and it needs to be a group of people that represents more than 50%, okay? Now, a plurality is the largest group in a pie chart or in any kind of statistic with percentages, where the largest group is less than 50%. So remember, if you're talking about majorities, you have to say it's more than 50%, and if you're talking about pluralities, it's less than 50%.
Okay, and on the right side of this pie chart, we can also see some percentages about the purposes why they have a part-time job.
Right, that's a very good thing to add, actually. And one of the reasons it's structured like this is obviously this second bar doesn't really apply to the people who never had a job. But what we see with this bar is a breakdown of the 25%. So we're not going to do the math. I can't tell you exactly how many people have each purpose, but we can see that a plurality of people who had a part-time job did this because they wanted to satisfy their own needs. And I say that because there are 40.3% of students who have part-time jobs for that reason, and that's not more than 50%. But it is the biggest group. And then what else do we have here? We have to accumulate work experience. Okay,
right.
So similar to you, Elsie, they're trying to train and practice for full-time work in the future.
26.4%.
26.4%. So that's another sizable minority that we have there. And then we have to share living expenses. Now, share living expenses, we could say, is kind of like supporting your family, you know, providing money to help your family pay for rent, for example, or pay for groceries. That's sharing living expenses. And
and we have to save money
exactly.
Others.
That's interesting for me. I would have thought that saving money would be people's main reason for part-time work, right?
I think the first one, to satisfy one's own needs, is really for maybe Taiwanese students here who work part-time.
Okay. Maybe this is a cultural difference.
Yeah,
then.
maybe.
Because I always remember when I was in high school, everybody who had part-time jobs was saying because they wanted to save money. You know, they wanted to travel in the summer, or they wanted to buy something expensive that they couldn't afford, and so they had a part-time job to do it. So lots of different reasons there. We're going to look now quickly at some vocabulary that can help us talk about this data and talk about our experience.
Right, there are some useful tips. 好，所以呢，以下我们要讲到的是圆饼图写作常会使用到的句型。我们的主词呢，当然放好 the pie chart， 后面的动词有好多可以让我们做搭配，比如说简单的 shows， the pie chart shows， 好，或者是我们用 displays， represents， 甚至用到片语 points out 都是可以的，然后再接下去接出 that 以及一个子句。那或者是呢，第二种我们可以用 according to the pie chart， 或者是 based on the pie chart 来做句子的开头，然后接着写出资讯。
Right.
Anything
And there's
else?
also some useful verbs here that we can use to talk about what the pie chart represents, or specifically the details of the pie chart. So we have this word here, comprises. The pie chart comprises. And when we talk about what something comprises, we're saying what it contributes to, what it is part of. And we can also say this in the passive form, the pie chart is comprised of, to say what smaller parts are in the pie chart. So the pie chart is comprised of two wedges, we could say, because we've got these two main groups. We could also say the pie chart accounts for would mean the pie chart means, or the pie chart reflects, okay? If we wanted to talk about the details in the pie chart, we could say the second biggest wedge accounts for 25.7% of students. So the second biggest wedge represents or shows 25.7% of students. Now, some other words we're going to definitely want to know are portion. Okay, so portion would be an amount, and specifically here we can use it to talk about the percentage or the different groups. And I just gave it away. Percentage is a word you definitely need to know. And also the other form of this word, percent. So a large percentage of students, for example, or a small percentage of students, that talks about a large group or a large group within a group of students. What else do we also need to talk about contrast as well, right? Because we're going to be doing some comparison between these different groups.
对的，因为我们还要再做各项目的比较，好，找出同样的是什么，不同的是什么。所以如果你要表示的是相似的是，好，你可以用一些副词来开头，像是呢 similarly。Likewise， 好，放在句首之后，逗点打上去，接下来接出主词和动词。那如果你要表达的是相反的，好，我们可以用 in contrast 或者是 by contrast， 一样也是放在句首，逗号之后再写出主词还有动词。那简单的像是什么呢？like 或是 unlike， 不过呢 like 跟 unlike 它是介系词，所以你后面要直接加上名词，逗号之后再接主词和动词。
Exactly. Now, we can also use some basic grammar structures to do comparisons, right? Because we're going to need to talk about differences between groups. So, you can use while and whereas to do this. So, how while and whereas work, to recap, is we put while and whereas in between two clauses where the two clauses describe very different things, okay? So, for example, we could say 40% of students who had a part-time job did so because they wanted to satisfy their own needs, whereas 26% wanted to accumulate work experience. So basically, whereas here sounds a bit like but it kind of emphasizes that there's two different situations, two groups of people who are doing part-time work for different reasons. Okay, I think here we can move on to our outline.
Okay, so Seb, can you remind us why it is so important to have an outline?
Outlining is very important. So when we do outlines, or when we prepare outlines, we plan out our thoughts and ideas before we start writing. I do this all the time because I have a tendency to start writing and then get carried away and write in the wrong direction, if that makes sense. In fact, I'm going to tell you a personal story because right now I'm writing my thesis.
Okay.
And my thesis is very, very long. It is about, yesterday it was 40,000 words.
40,000 words.
Yeah, so about 120 pages long.
Wow.
And I was having a meeting with my professor, and she told me, you're going to have to rewrite half of it. because halfway through, I started going in the wrong direction with my research and writing in the wrong direction, focusing on the wrong details, and then the whole research went in the wrong direction. So she said, you need to redo this whole massive part.
Okay, so like half of the thesis you have to rewrite.
Half of the thesis, yes. So I'm dying right now. But the moral of this story, the reason I'm telling you this horrible story and trying not to cry is because outlining is so important. You know,
right.
I think if I had outlined the thesis better, I wouldn't have made that mistake because I would have had a better plan of what to do.
So lesson learned.
So lesson learned, exactly. You can never be too good at doing outlines, and that's why you should do it every single time. So when we do an outline, we do a quick basically a bullet list, or it can be kind of like notes that you would take in class that show you what you want to talk about. So actually, when we do these episodes, I normally write it as an outline. I normally write lots of different short sentences which say, Elsie and I are going to talk about this, and then we should talk about this, and then we should talk about this. And that's how we plan things. So looking at our example outline here, we have exactly that. We have 2 topic sentences, which are sentences that say the main point of the paragraph. And then we have our supporting information. So that's stuff that supports our argument and also relates our argument to the pie chart. So what can we see in the first paragraph, Elsie?
OK， 所以呢，第一个段落，我们的提示说要分析图表上看到的资讯，对不对？然后呢，不要加入自己主观的意见。那我们就看到了主题句是 The pie chart is about high school students and part-time jobs。好，清楚简单的带出今天的主题。
So in our second paragraph, we have basically the writer talking about their personal experience. And so obviously the topic sentence begins by saying, I'm a part of the majority of high school students in Taiwan. So immediately they associate themselves with this 74.3%. They're saying, I don't have a job. And that's what they say in the second point. They say, I've never had a job. My parents say that I must focus on my schoolwork, and I would like to get a job to start saving money. I agree with his parents. I think that it's really good to work, and you should definitely have a part-time job if you think you can manage it. But if you're a student, it's your second priority. It's not your top priority.
Right.
Your top priority is to do well in school and, you know, get good grades, get into a good school, and be able to achieve the things you want to achieve in life. So that's a good moral to this story, we could say. A moral is a lesson that you learn from a story. We've got the conclusion here. I hope to buy a scooter so I can travel around. So a good reason to have a part-time job at the end. So let's take a quick break here, and then when we're back, we'll go through some writing tips and also look through our first and second samples. Basic sample. The pie chart is about whether high school students have part-time jobs and why. 74.3% of students who responded to the survey had never had a job. Of the students with jobs, a large percentage of them, 40.3%, had a job in order to earn their own money. Meanwhile, just under a quarter of working students took a job to help with their family's living expenses. However, 26.4% of students had a job simply because they wanted work experience, and 9% wanted to save money. According to the chart, only 0.3% of students had a part-time job for other reasons. I'm a part of the majority of high school students in Taiwan. I've never had a job, even though I would like one. My parents say that I must focus on my schoolwork and my grades. However, I would like to get a job to start saving money. Eventually, I hope to buy a scooter for myself so I can travel around in my free time. Okay, so very clear, structured sample we have here. It answers the question very clearly. It breaks down the chart, and also talks about the writer's own reasons for not having a job and the reasons they would like to have one in the future. So I like everything about the way that this is written. What are some words that we can take away from this sample?
OK， 所以这边有很多的用字好或句型，我们可以跟他学习。像是第一个，他用到的是 The pie chart is about， 好带出今天的主题，或者是呢，我们还看到他用 according to the chart， 好逗号之后带出主题，带出上面的资讯。那再来就是群体中的大部分，我们可以说 a large percentage of。后面加上群体，那再来呢？另一方面，这边他用到的是 meanwhile， 当然你也可以用 on the other hand， 好也是可以的。那作者用 meanwhile 带出两种数据。
Right, let's move on now to the advanced sample. Advanced sample. In the provided pie chart, we are presented with information about the experiences of Taiwanese high schoolers as they relate to part-time jobs.Of the students surveyed, just under 3/4 had no experience working a part-time job. The 25.7% of students who had worked part-time had a number of different motivations for doing so. A large portion of them took part-time jobs in order to fulfill their own needs, but nearly 1/4 of them worked to contribute to living expenses. Just under 10% of working students got part-time jobs in order to save money.But what's especially interesting is that the chart reveals that more than double that number got jobs to accumulate work experience. Less than 0.5% of students with jobs gave other reasons than these. As a high school student in my final year of classes, this chart reflects what I see around me. Many of my classmates don't work, but the reasons of those who do match those offered by the students who were surveyed.Personally, I fall into the category of students who earn money to make ends meet. My mother was injured when I was in junior high school, so once I was old enough, I got a part-time job to help my family. I consider myself lucky to be able to pay my own school fees, which removes some financial pressure from my parents. At the same time, though, I'm also gaining valuable experience in the workplace.Having a job while being a full-time student is not easy, but I must confess that on good days, the challenge is invigorating. Right, I can certainly identify with the conclusion of this sample. I must confess that on good days, the challenge is invigorating. I'm sure that you must agree with me, Elsie, that when you're very, very busy, when you have a lot on your plate, but you have one of those days where you get everything done and you just feel unstoppable, it's a really good feeling, you know?
Yes.
When you get all your tasks done and you're like, I can do anything.
Right.
That's a very invigorating feeling. It fills you with energy and it fills you with positivity.
Invigorating 这个形容词用得很棒哈，它代表的是令人振奋的。那再来呢，还有一些很好的用法，像是呢完成满足他们的需求，在图表上我们看到它用的是 satisfy， 不过这里呢，它用的是 fulfill。Their own needs， 好，我们改用这个 fulfill 这个字是很棒的。再来还有贡献在生活开销上 ，contribute， 好，这个动词被用了出来 ，contribute to living expenses。接下来增加工作经验，这个我们在图表上也有看到 ，accumulate work experience。再来哦，他要带出自己的经验的时候，他用到了 personally， 好，或者是我们可以用 as far as I'm concerned， 就我自己而言。再来一个 make ends meet， 好，这个用法也是很好的，代表的是勉强维持生计，使收支平衡。
All right, that's all the time we have for today's chat. We will be joining you later in the month to talk about topic writing and to talk about translation. So we will see you then. I'm Seb.
I'm Elsie.
And we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.